and displaced people from across the world who are passionate about our planet and the well-being of their communities to advocate for climate justice, action, and inclusion of frontline communities everywhere. They're here because the impact of climate change on their lives has been underreported, underrepresented, and neglected for far too long. And the evidence could not be clearer. Earlier this week, in this very room, UNHCR High Commissioner Filippo Grandi launched our first climate report, No Escape, which explores the growing intersection between climate change, conflict, and forced displacement. The data reveals that out of the over 120 million refugees and displaced people in the world, 90 million are currently living in areas under high to extreme climate change impacts. That's 3 in every 4 refugees who are being forced to flee one danger, conflict, war, persecution, and heading towards another danger, drought, flooding, extreme heat. And the situation is getting worse by the day. Despite this reality, the gaps in climate action and financing are stark. 90% of climate finance goes to high carbon-emitting, middle-income countries. Countries who have contributed the least to this global emergency are receiving the least and yet are bearing the highest brunt. Joining me today to tell you more are 2 individuals extremely passionate about climate justice for displaced communities. We will first hear from Opira Bosco-Okot, founding member of Refugees for Climate Action. Opira is a climate activist and South Sudanese refugee living in Uganda, who uses his passion for filmmaking and public speaking to advocate on behalf of displaced communities worldwide. We will then hear from UNHCR Global Ambassador Theo James, actor and UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, who has been supporting UNHCR's work since 2016. He has traveled with UNHCR to Greece, France, Jordan, and most recently Mauritania, meeting with asylum seekers and refugees to help raise awareness on the critical issues refugees are facing. Opira, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. My name is Opira Bosco-Okot, and I'm a South Sudanese who spent the last 7 years in Uganda as a refugee. I have witnessed firsthand how climate change, displacement, and peace are interconnected. How you experience the climate crisis depends on who you are and where you live. The communities least responsible for carbon emissions, fragile and war-torn countries, the forced displaced, the refugees are paying the highest price. Where I come from, a refugee survives on $3 per month as food aid. Women and girls face severe consequences as they are culturally responsible for cooking food. The trace for firewood as a sole source of energy for cooking increases violence among communities and exposes girls to sex or gender-based violence. Children are unable to go to school because they cannot afford a pen. Refugee human rights are directly affected by climate change. After seeing all this, I decided to become a climate advocate. I met like-minded refugees living in climate-fragile countries, and together we founded a refugee climate network that we are launching today. On behalf of myself and my brothers Anwar from Myanmar, Bath from DR Congo, Hermano from Haiti, and my sister Deline from Rwanda, Iman from Yemen, Jean from Rwanda, and Najiba from Afghanistan, collectively lend our voices and experiences to advocate for urgent climate action. As refugees and displaced people scattered across the globe, we have intimately witnessed the profound impact of war on our lives and communities, and now a global climate emergency. We have first-hand knowledge of the environmental changes sweeping our planet. Having experienced forced displacement due to conflict, persecution, and extreme weather events, we are keenly aware of the hardship faced by individuals and communities who have been forced to leave their homes behind and we understand the escalating displacement resulting from climate change. Our collective experiences echo the stories of those who have lost their homes due to conflict, and now cyclones, floods, droughts, and unremitting failures of crops. We understand the plight of those who find themselves in a state of perpetual waiting for asylum for the next leg of their journey, or simply for the rains that hold the promise of sustenance. The loss of homes and the struggles that follow are our shared experience, compelling us to unite in our efforts to address the challenges confronting the planet we all call home. We recognize the critical need for concerted action to safeguard our collective future. Through our combined efforts, we aim to ensure that the voices of those most affected by the impact of climate change are not only heard, but amplified. We stand committed to advocating for the voices that often go unheard and overlooked, thereby securing a seat at the table for the most vulnerable and affected populations. We affirm our commitments to working collectively for the betterment of our shared future. Our goal is to advocate for meaningful change and to address the challenges faced by displaced populations and communities worldwide. We are standing up for our planet, claiming our place at the table, not just to speak, but to advocate for climate justice. For everyone, ensure that our voices representing the most climate-impacted population are heard and heeded. We are a team of refugees and displaced people from everywhere advocating for climate justice, inclusion, and action for both people and planet. And we are taking our seats at the table. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Apira, for being here and for these wonderful, beautiful words. Theo, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi there. And I'm very honored to be speaking alongside Apira today to launch the Refugees for Climate Action Network, and thanks for your words. You're incredibly eloquent. We want to raise the alarm about the impact the climate crisis is having on refugees and make sure that their voices are heard. Time's running out and the lives of some of the most vulnerable people are at stake. Now, one of the reasons I am motivated to support this cause, specifically, is because of my own family history. My grandfather was a refugee who fled the Nazi occupation of Greece and found safe haven in Syria during the Second World War. Later, he joined the UN refugee program when it was in its infancy, working as a doctor in Gothenburg, administering vaccines to displaced people of Western Europe. And I guess that showed me how short our collective memories are in terms of, when people are displaced. It was only very recently that Europeans were being forced to flee themselves. My family history motivated me to become involved with the UNHCR, and I've been privileged to meet incredibly inspiring refugees like Apira and others around the world. And I've seen firsthand the growing injustice of the climate crisis, and the situation is, quite frankly, desperate. Last month, I traveled to Mauritania, a country almost entirely in the Sahara Desert, where climate shocks are frequent and getting more frequent. There are seasonal floods followed by crippling droughts and extreme heat. Whilst global temperatures are predicted to increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next few decades, in Mauritania specifically, the temperature expected to rise by double that. And when I visited, the temperature was around 40 degrees Celsius in the morning, which already felt unbearable and frankly untenable. I met refugees in the west of Mauritania, where around 250,000 Malians are being hosted in 70 villages and the UNHCR Imbera camp. They told me about how life was becoming completely untenable in the desert, and they asked me to personally from them, urge world leaders at COP to take action. And they're the best people to do so because they are being affected on the ground themselves. One of the people I met was Mariama, who had to flee her home in Mali because of the fighting that had ripped through the country. She told me that the dry season had extended from 3 to 9 months of the year, and she'd seen that happen in the last 5 years, leaving the wells empty, parents frantic about how their children are going to survive. And I asked her what she wanted to say to people here at COP, and she said, tell them we're thirsty. Tell them we don't have enough water for ourselves and our children, our cattle, and our vegetables. We cannot survive without water. I also met a 70-year-old man called Momo, a very impressive man in Mbera refugee camp who had once worked as a physics professor in Mali, but was no longer able to because of the conflict that had broken out. And he felt a deep emotional connection with the environment. He keenly felt that the need to protect biodiversity as a refugee. He told me poetically that the forests speak a lot, even if they're mute. The world must understand that trees are suffering and that the trees are crying out. Now, Mariama and Momo and many others across Africa have escaped war only to fight another battle with the impacts of climate change, something that, Apires has to do himself multiple times, being displaced twice. They're facing a food crisis, a water crisis, a shelter crisis, and ultimately a survival crisis. But what was interesting was I came away from Mauritania with a real sense of hope. These are resilient, impressive people, and a sense that things could change if we are to empower them as much as possible. UNHCR has found green solutions in Mbera camp. They have built dams to provide water for the community. There are solar-powered pipes to draw water from wells, and refugees are being helped to plant crops and reforest the surrounding area. Refugees themselves are also finding solutions personally. Because of the extreme heat in Mauritania, bushfires are an increasing threat, obviously, and one of the refugees I met, called Hantam, had organized a group of men into a fire brigade to put out fires as soon as they see smoke on the horizon. The refugees combat the bushfires by planting trees and building fire breaks. What I learned from Hantam and his associates is even though people have experienced trauma and loss, they can work together to protect the environment and to make it a priority for them. Here at COP, I want to draw attention to the concerns of refugees for climate action, because I've seen that the people who contribute the least in terms of carbon emissions are often the hardest hit by the climate crisis, which is insanity. I know it's something that you can say in a press conference, but the reality of it is ridiculous. This is a new, relatively, and escalating injustice. As we've heard, of the 120 million people forcibly displaced around the world, 90 million of them are facing high to extreme climate change impacts. That's why more help is needed now. People displaced by impacts of climate change and conflict need protection, and they need help from climate financing specifically. The people I met in Mauritania and refugees like them are urging our leaders to listen. How can they survive when the homes they have fled from war, now they enter a place where they are being pushed to the limits because of climate change and lack of resources? There's nowhere left for them to go. We have to act now to reverse these trends. The climate desperately, desperately needs our attention. And despite the uncertain state of the global climate as it is and as it continues to evolve, singular governments and political leaders will not determine the face of humanity. We, the people, and successive generations, we will determine it. We don't need to be perfect, but we can all make a difference. Small actions can lead to big change. Delegates at COP need to take action today to protect people on the front line of the climate crisis, because that is the only way we can help sustain an environment that will ultimately protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, Goodwill Ambassador. We will now open the floor for questions. Because of our limited time, we will prioritize questions from members of the press. If you do have a question, please raise your hand. We have a colleague passing a microphone. Please state your name and the media organization you represent. We're opening the floor to questions. We have the lady over there.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ilka Vega, and I work immigration issues in the Texas-Mexico border. We receive a lot of migrants and refugees and displaced persons along our borders. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, because it's very important that we hear directly from those impacted, and those voices are often lacked, not only because of legal barriers, but also social barriers that exist, as well as the fear of being persecuted or discriminalized, or action that could be taken against if people are opening up. So this forum is like an incredible opportunity. My invitation and question is hoping to include people from Latin America that often don't receive refugee status or legal protections for migration. It's one of the areas of the world that is the least protected in terms of legal systems and frameworks for them to be able to migrate. How you're planning to reach out to them, if so, and then also how you're hoping to, through this platform, just give more voices. What are the mechanisms that you're hoping to implement with the people that you're working with?
Perhaps I'll interject to say I would invite everybody to check out the body of evidence, 60-page of evidence that we've collected from all corners of the world, including Latin America. And I think you'll see the calls to action at the end of the report, which calls on the protection of all displaced communities as a result of a multiplicity of factors, including conflict, war, persecution, and now climate change. I would invite you to read the report. And I think, the evidence speaks for itself. Hermano is a member of the Refugees for Climate Action. He's an agronomist from Haiti, based in Belém, Brazil, who will host COP30 next year. And so I invite you to follow the work they're doing. They're exactly doing what you're hoping will happen, is call for the protection of the communities everywhere, Latin America and everywhere. Thank you so much for your question. Any other questions? Gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Sibi from the Associated Press. My question is to Oper. Yeah. So, do you feel money that could be spent for climate action is being taken away by wars that are ongoing around the world? Some estimates say $2.4 trillion is being spent on defense around the world nowadays. So, do you feel that money can be better used for climate change, and we are at a finance COP where people are trying to find the money? Thanks.
I think, Pierre, you'll be able to speak on kind of what needs do you need as communities, as displaced communities. We've spoken about the stark gaps in climate financing not reaching these communities, and I think perhaps you're able to explain to the gentleman, kind of, as displaced communities, why do you need climate finance to reach you?
Yeah. That you think the money should be spent on war or climate action? I think I didn't get the question right.
Yeah, sorry. We'll both answer it. Yes, that would be what we would hope, that the money spent on defense contracts in a highly politicized world is money wasted, let's be honest. I guess we are looking to engage the Loss and Damage Fund, and we feel like after the research that UNHCR did with 12 other research groups to link climate change directly with displaced people, we feel like refugees should be part of the Loss and Damage Fund because they are on the front lines of it. But yes, of course, going back to your question about use of money on defense, yeah, that's exacerbating the problem. I mean, war drives, displaced people into areas which cannot sustain them because they are at the forefront of, a climate crisis.
I think I got your question well now. Because if you see, mainly the cost of war and violence, you find sometimes somehow the government is involved. And then the people at the forefront continue to suffer, whether they're within the country or they have been displaced. So when we talk about climate financing, it's actually supporting the people who are at the forefront, which is mainly even the people that are displaced already. There can be some diplomatic way of eradicating war without actually spending on defense. But that's a possibility. But then I think there is no alternative for displaced people who are suffering from climate change. We must support them financially. Only diplomatic relations or talking cannot solve that without allocating funds. So we are here at the COP to talk about whether the fund is small or we are still raising for more. We have to locate the ones we have to actually support the crisis which is ongoing. Because this climate crisis is actually causing death of people by the day. So we cannot wait whether the money is small or we are still advocating for more. We need to put the one we have to continue responding to the crisis that we are facing. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Melina Walling, also with the Associated Press. My question is about star power, and we're talking about financing. So I'm wondering if you have a message for, the power of celebrity and maybe to other celebrities about, how they can channel financing into this problem as well.
Oh, star power. I don't know if I have any of that, but I think my job is to amplify, that's singularly my job, is to amplify people's voices like Apira. I think that's the most we can do. There's no pretense that we are experts, but using any platform that we have, I think we can tell the stories of the people who are facing, the brunt of climate change on the front lines. And that's, it goes back to why I went to Mauritania. There's no point me pontificating about it. What I need to do working with the UNHCR is hear people's stories and tell their stories. So really, I'm just a vessel for them to share to large delegations like this.
All right. Any more? We have time for one more question. Meanwhile, I'll also invite everybody to. Is there a question? Someone was pointing at someone. I'll also invite you to check the press release for the launch of Refugees for Climate Action. You'll find it on the UNHCR website. There's also a press pack with photos and B-roll from Theo's recent trip to Mauritania, but also photos and B-roll from the 8 members of Refugees for Climate Action. I'll also invite you again to read the No Escape report. It's on our website, and follow the journeys and the work of Apira, Najiba, Hermano, Barth, and the rest of the group. Thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of COP.